guys, I'm Chris Black, and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. And this week we're going to be taking a closer look at a track which has been on YouTube nearly enough 2 years now and has just tipped over 100,000 views, during which time I've had countless requests for not only the backing track but to make the tab available. So here we are. This is taking a look at my version of Childish Gambino's Redbone. Now, unfortunately for this video, I can't make the backing track available purely for the fact that it is the official instrumental version. However, if you follow the link down in the description box below, you may well find some way where you can get hold of that. But the tab in all of its glory, all of its handwritten glory, is available through my website. It went a great effort to tab out every little detail and every little nuance. Hopefully that'll be of interest to some of you guys. This video is going to focus on some of the more kind of integral points of making the track work. But as ever, for those of you who do want a note-by-note transcription, that is now available through my website. But without further ado, let's delve right in and get on with it. So, first thing definitely worth mentioning before we get into any of the fun stuff is going to be the tuning of the track, which in this case is a rather unusual one. Going by the official version of this track, it is somewhere in the region of 40 cents sharp of standard tuning. Slightly flatter than being a half step up, but likewise infinitely sharper than being in standard tuning. The way basically I achieved this was to tune to the track, which in the absence of a tuner accurate enough to display when you are 40 cents sharp is probably the most kind of the easiest way of doing it, I guess, to be honest. Now, if you want to use my E string as a reference point, tune your E string to that and then across your 5th and 4th frets, as you would do ordinarily. That should get you somewhere kind of in the region of the track. It may take a little bit of tweaking from there on to make sure you are perfectly in pitch. Obviously, this does apply to the official instrumental version, which I downloaded, which again I shall link in the description box below. But should hopefully get you close enough for jazz. Now, I actually dug out the original session file in going back to try and find out what specific gear I used on this track, and was rather intrigued to see that rather than my usual sort of Tweed Deluxe setting that I used within Guitar Rig, for whatever reason that day, back in June of 2018, I used a Vox AC30 emulation within Guitar Rig, obviously in conjunction with the Revstar 502 and the P90s I was using. Got me in the kind of ballpark of the sound I was going for in my head. Don't know why. Sounds great now. Must have sounded great then. In conjunction then with Tube Screamer, effectively running in the effects loop, obviously with a clean blend all the way up and the gain very low. So we're not really using it as an overdrive so much as we're just using it as a bit of a kind of mid boost. Obviously then we've got the auto filter, which I shall come to in a minute. Cue the million questions I get about that. And then a bit of tape echo and a copious amount of spring reverb as ever. So without the auto filter, the guitar tone sounds a little bit like this. Now to quickly turn on the auto filter and give you an idea of how that sounds. Now, the cool thing about the auto filter, or auto wah, or whatever you want to call it, is that, apart from the effect and the sound it makes, it really makes you think about how you play. And in this case, it pretty much dictated, it was a subconscious thought process, that all of that intro section was going to be played with my fingers. Plectrum sounds cool, sounds equally as kind of good, I guess, to sort of use a slightly vague term, but for me at least, using my fingers gave it that kind of round, plummy sort of dynamic quality, which for the track at least particularly worked in this case. So again, just to give you some examples of what's happening there, for the bulk of it, I'm going to be using the fleshy part of my middle finger. But for some of it where I want a little bit more of a pronounced attack, I'm going to be using the nail. Obviously, there's a lot going on, so just kind of keep a close eye on the right hand. As I said, in not having much sustain to play with, that's the kind of downside of the auto filter, is it very much does kill the sustain as soon as the note sort of ceases to ring as prominently as it has been. Couple that then with the spring reverb and the tape echo to sort of fill in the blanks a little bit. But as I said, as soon as there's not sustain there that you're kind of used to, it really does make you think about the attack and the way in which you approach the notes. And in that respect, I really thought that using my fingers was probably the best way to go. To be honest, the same goes for the rest of the track. Using my fingers over a plectrum was kind of the order of the day. There's a couple of the faster runs later on in the track which use a plectrum, but 95% of the track is very much going to be finger-based. I'm not going to turn the auto filter off to do some demonstrating of specific licks and runs, just for the fact of making myself more legible and understandable. But this first bit of the melody, which is what I'm going to focus on in this video, there's a million other notes in the track, which, as I said, are available in the tab on my website, should you want to get that. But for me, at least, the key to this track is nailing the melody and making sure that, as much as the temptation is, given an instrumental track or given a kind of blank canvas, carte blanche to go widdly and play whatever you want for the next kind of 5 minutes, making sure that there's some contextual grounding in regards to kind of making sure that refrain or that melody or that motif or whatever you want to call it is really reiterated several times throughout the track is absolutely essential. It kind of loses every sort of inch of context that it might have otherwise. So we're going to start with that melody and kind of take it from there. As I said, all of the kind of faster stuff, all of the runs, all of the more kind of fun stuff, I guess, in essence, is available in the tab if you want to go for note. But the key of this track very much lies in the melody. Now, the intro, as I've said, pretty simple to play. There's not much to it. There's nothing particularly technically challenging, but as ever, it's how you play the notes. It's how you maybe don't play certain notes, and it's how you approach others that really kind of form the basis of this. So to start at the start, which is as good a place as any. Again, fingers on right hand, we're going to be sliding from your 8th fret to your 10th fret and then back to your 8th fret on your B string. For pulling off to your 6th fret on your B, for then down to your 5th fret on your B. Now, this 5th fret note is a particularly good example, I should say, in regard to how I go about at least trying to make these a little bit more realistic, a little bit more vocal, a little bit more fluid. The 5th fret, as I said, is a particularly good example. It would have been very easy just to play that 5th fret. But for me, at least, sliding into that 5th fret, albeit momentarily from your 4th, gives it an infinitely more kind of realistic vocal quality. As I said, it's a really kind of sort of momentary thing, but really sort of takes it into another dimension. Straight notes then, we're going to be on your 5th fret of your G, followed by your 7th fret of your D. Resolving, again, this note is a particularly good example of a couple of different things, actually. Resolving to the root of the track, D, on your G string, on your 7th fret. Now, two things hopefully you will have taken away from that last note. How I approached the note, again, it would have been easy enough just to sort of play the D, but for me at least, sliding into it from the 5th fret, from your C note on your G string, just gave it a kind of vocal quality, again, something you can imagine a great singer singing, ultimately. And again, then hopefully you will have noticed my vibrato, which is, again, essential at kind of making this sound realistic. Not coming in straight away, you had a fair section of just literally holding the note in perfect pitch, before then introducing a little bit of vibrato. If you've not been watching them, by the way, can't recommend them enough. Tom Bukovac videos that he started doing the corona virus lockdown on YouTube at the moment. Again, I'll link to those below. Fantastic video he put up the other day where he was talking about Whitney Houston's vibrato being a great example of this. A fantastic exponent of holding a note flat before introducing a subtle bit of vibrato as she kind of tails off. And that's pretty much the effect I was going for here. Again, the speed and depth of the vibrato are very much up to you. But again, if you're kind of introducing anything kind of too manic or too harsh, kind of really detracts from the overall sentiment of the track, I guess. So thus far we have. So your next part, we're going to start on your 5th fret on your G. For then onto your 7th fret of your G. Notice as well, these are very staccato, very sort of curtailed notes. Again, if we combine that then with the autofilter momentarily, is a really pronounced, really cool effect. So we got 5-7 on your G, followed by 6 on your B, up to 8 on your E before a very quick slide. Again, a very kind of vocalized, sort of stylized inflection to round it off. And that's pretty much the kind of the main part of the motif. That repeats then. The only difference being the second time round is instead of sliding up to your 10th from your 8th on that the note there, we're going to hold that note in much the same way we did with that note there. Introducing the vibrato a little bit later on. So, just to run through quickly. Now, obviously, the only bit we haven't covered there is that last bit. Again, we're going to be sliding into your 5th fret from your 4th fret. For sliding up or hammering on, doesn't really matter. Again, it's personal preference. To your 6th fret. And then sliding up from your 6th to your 8th and back down to your 6th to resolve. That, as I said, makes up pretty much the kind of bulk of the initial melody. I then leave the auto filter on for the kind of first part of the verse, which we're going to touch upon now very quickly. But hopefully that'll give you some insight. As I said, I can't stress the importance enough of really coming back to that. You'll notice I do it several times throughout the track. Coming back to it in amongst all the kind of other sort of whittling all over the neck. Speaking of which, this track is a particularly good example, actually, of getting to a point where you're comfortable enough to play all over the neck, really. I'm working my way from the kind of 1st and 2nd and 3rd frets right up to the 22nd fret in various points. So check out the tab if you want to learn that. But in regard to the sort of the more integral points of this track, hopefully this video will serve as a bit of an insight. In regard to the last bit I wanted to talk about, we have this part, which if I kick the auto filter back in, now, there's a few things going on here, namely, obviously, a couple of different sort of multi-step bends, for want of a better phrase to call them. Obviously, then kind of resolve into the kind of slidey stuff again. But I've tabbed them out and I've called them quarter note bends. I'm not sure whether that's even a correct term, to be honest, but they're definitely not half-step bends, and they're definitely not full-tone bends either. Somewhere in the middle, I guess, or maybe quarter tone is a good way of putting it. I'm not sure. But what I mean by that is you're going to be starting off on your 8th fret, that very subtle bend there. Now, as I said, we're not half tone, because it's definitely not that note we're aiming for. Really subtle, kind of a wobble more than anything, to be honest. It really is very subtle. Before going into a full tone bend. Now, again, how much vibrato you put on this is entirely up to you. I've kept it relatively flat, again, maybe introducing a little bit of vibrato towards the end, but again, that's entirely personal preference. Slowly falling off the note. Now, this next bit, we're going to be having a full tone bend, followed by a tone and a half bend, followed by another full tone bend, followed by falling off the note. Sounds a little bit like this. Now, again, if this isn't something you're particularly accustomed to, it may take a little bit of a time to get it to sound not like a cat. It really is a case of having those bends kind of properly intonated and really hitting the note you're aiming for. If you're flat or if you're sharp, you end up with something kind of really not. Doesn't really kind of work. So make sure those bends are hitting the note you're kind of really aiming for. And in the meantime, if you're struggling, just play the notes themselves. Again, that's a crucial part of bends for me, is working out where the notes are on the fretboard that you're aiming for and having a better understanding of how far you need to bend to hit them. So, as I said, we've got... wrong note. But again, with that very kind of subtle quarter note bend, resolving back down to the 6th fret on your B string. And then the very last thing I wanted to touch upon is that little slide there. So we're going to be sliding from your 6th to your 8th fret on the B string. Now, how you do this is up to you. I kind of vary between two different techniques. I either bend it or I'll slide it. Ultimately, the effect is pretty much the same. It's just kind of different ways of achieving the same effect. I would say the latter there is marginally more controlled. Again, it's very similar to what we've just done with that kind of quarter note bend. Really is a very subtle wobble. The more you slow it down, obviously, the more it accentuates that it's not necessarily a note you want to be lingering on, but if you very quickly touch upon it, you can get away with it. Likewise, if you slide that and basically just go up a fret, it's arguably a more pronounced effect that in this context doesn't work quite so well, I would say, but is a very valid way of doing it. So just to recap on that last little section. Kick the auto filter in. And there you have it. Hopefully this video was of some interest to you. As I said, it wasn't so much about a note-by-note transcription. That is what the tab is all about. This was about getting to the heart of what really makes this track tick. And ultimately, if you are going to be kind of doing any guitar jams like this, what, at least in my humble opinion, is essential to really making sure that they work and don't just turn into a bit of a kind of a guitar whittle fest, I guess, ultimately. But as ever, a massive thank you for watching. I've been Chris Buck. This is Friday Fretworks, and I shall see you next week for another episode. Cheers, guys. Take care. See you soon.